Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this session about becoming a charity treasurer. I'm Penny, I'm from Getting On Board, and this is part of our trustee learning programme. So you're very, very welcome this evening for the next hour. Before I pass over to Liz Pepler and our wonderful panel who are with us for this evening, I've just got a few bits of housekeeping. First of all, you will have seen that the session is being recorded. You'll be sent the recording afterwards via a Zoom link. Anything you put in the chat will be on that recording unless you're sending a direct message. So please just be aware of that. The session will also go on to YouTube. So obviously, if you don't want to appear on YouTube, feel free to keep your video off. We would love, however, for you to keep your video on, and just be aware we're not going to broadcast you to the 9 o'clock news. If it's being watched on YouTube, it's being watched by other people who are interested in becoming charity treasurers. So it's all for the greater good. So we do hope that you'll keep your videos on. Closed captions have been enabled at our end. So if you want to have subtitles, you can put them on via your closed caption button at your end. We'd absolutely love you to use the chat to introduce yourselves, to tell us why you've come, to tell us what you're hoping to get out of this session. And also please use the chat to ask questions as well. Please stay on mute, so you've been muted as you come into the room. That's just so that we can keep the sound nice and clear for everybody. And I think the last thing I need to say is thank you very much to Rathbones Investment Management who sponsor these sessions, and it's thanks to them that all of the sessions are free, and I hope that you'll have a look at the other sessions that we have on as well. So thank you very much, have a good hour, and I'm going to pass over to Liz who's chairing the session.
Thank you Penny. Welcome. It's the end of Thursday and we've got an hour. It's a treat, isn't it? We've got an hour to sit and reflect and think and ask questions and connect. And that's quite rare. Normally I'm doing. And so actually this thinking, reflecting, talking, connecting time is really welcome. Thank you, Penny. Really looking forward to it. We're going to do a round of introductions. I'm going to come to the panelists and ask people to introduce themselves and to give a bit of a sense of background, experience, entry routes into their lives as a treasurer. Then we might have one quick question to the panel, but then we're going to open it because we're here actually to hear your questions, answer your questions and talk together. And if you want your video on, fantastic. If we can see people, it's really helpful. But your comfort is more important than ours. So video off is also fine. And first of all, I'm going to start with you, Ansel. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So I'm Umsel Page von Spreckelsen. I am I work in the charity sector and I volunteer in the charity sector. So I work, I've been a finance person in the charity sector for about 15 odd years. I currently work as a freelancer doing management accounting. And then as a treasurer, so I have been treasurer for a couple of different organisations. At the moment, I am treasurer at Buy Pride UK, which is a teeny tiny sort of 20k turnover organisation. And I'm also, I'm actually chair of Gendered Intelligence's board, which is a much larger sort of million and a half turnover organisation. I'm treasurer, but we're looking for someone to replace me, so I'm not doing both of those at the same time. And yeah, and that's it. I think you wanted qualifications. I'm sort of CIMA part qualified, so I'm in that space. Yeah, and that's me.
Thanks, Ansel. And the other thing, it would be really helpful to hear from you is your experience in terms of being in the board and at the operations, on the operations side of a charity.
Yeah, so the fascinating thing, well, I mean, I basically at this point, I just live charities. Occasionally I'd say to my partner, oh, I'm done with that. And they say to me, yeah, but you're never going to do anything else other than charity, are you? So I've been I've basically done every role in a finance office in a charity. And then now I'm doing most of the also having tried all the different stuff at strategic level. So yeah, I love it. I love the differences between them. But yeah, I think I've been across the board for it. So.
Both aspects, sitting in lots of seats around the table, really helpful. Thank you, Ansel. Kemi, coming to you. Tell us about your experiences, your skills, your interests. Where are you coming from, Kemi?
Yes, hi everyone. Good evening. It's great to be here. My name is Kemi Olafari. I am SEMA qualified. In my day job, I'm a finance business partner at a health innovation organisation. I've worked in not-for-profits all of my career. So I've worked in international development, I've worked for a national charity, and I've also worked for a university. I was previously a treasurer and trustee for a small charity called Faces in Focus, which provided mental health counselling free of charge to young people. I am currently an ambassador for a wonderful organisation called Charter Path, which is also focused on getting more accountants into volunteering. I'm also a representative for a charity called Huntington's Disease Association, and that is supporting the charity across all aspects. So I actually don't use my finance hat that often. It can be to be supporting fundraising, raising awareness, or advising on documentation. And I am also an advisor for a secondary school in South London, providing support for their careers advice.
And do you sleep, Kemi?
Sometimes, yes. I am tired quite a lot as well.
Time to sleep. That's impressive. Okay, thanks, Kemi. They do say if you want something doing, ask a busy person. Thank you.
Definitely.
Nicola, can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course, yes. That tired word does resonate with me. I'm representing the grey hair in the room. Clearly, I have a talented hairdresser, so you can't see quite as much of it as you would otherwise. But so my story is rather longer than most of yours, but I'm a serial trustee, basically. I started with the Prince's Trust when I was about 35, Prince's Youth Business Trust. First year it was set up. I went on age and stage, a lot of people, followed my enthusiasms, but also I used my qualifications, which have changed over time too. So they fed my enthusiasms too. So I went to be, for instance, work for, when my kids were at school, it was a big private school with 5 different schools. Being head of finance committee there is very much like an operational role, but it means you're helped by the people who work there because they want the school to succeed and they want their treasurer to be a success. So as I went along, I started off as a chartered accountant, and then as my enthusiasms grew, I was a magistrate as well, which is the ultimate volunteering job, but you don't get a title with that. You're just there doing it an awful lot. I got cross about stuff. I got cross about probation. I got cross about criminal justice. And I think that quite often fires what you do. So everyone who knows me will know I drone on about doing a master's at Cass Business School. I went there to write a dissertation because I was cross about something. Got there and thought, oh my God, I've been a charity trustee for so long. How can I know so little about it? So I ended up not doing a dissertation, doing 12 talk courses, and suddenly the scales fell from my eyes. And since then, about 9 years ago, I've done virtually nothing else. Did have a bit of a day job, but I think for me, and Liz, you'll segue into a minute asking me about my journey, but I think that tells you that that following enthusiasms gets you the qualifications, because I've now got, as well as my chartered accountancy, I've now got the MSc, and also I got cross about something else. So I'm now doing a PhD full time in a social sciences university in Sheffield. So I can look at the why. I spent so long time looking at the what and looking at the wake of things. I'm now interested in seeing, why are people like this? And does the law let them all? And if so, how do we shed some light on why people do things? Does that cover all your...
Yes, I think pretty much. I think that's a really comprehensive backstory. Did you mention your treasurer role?
I didn't, you're correct. I'm at the moment, my main charity work is as treasurer and as a trustee of the Honorary Treasurers Forum, which is small but mighty. Those of us who are involved in it know it is, but it is a massively full-time job. And because of my background, I've taken on some of the tech roles as well in the Treasurers Forum. So for instance, I'm on the SORP committee and I'm monitoring what they're going to do with the Charities Act, because they haven't put that in SORP yet, because they didn't see it coming apparently. So that's basically my current day job. And because of the PhD, I've stopped doing all the other ones I did.
Well, it sounds enough. Enough. Brilliant, thank you. A tiny bit about me. I'm a bookkeeper, a mere bookkeeper. I'm not a chartered accountant. I fell into finance 20 odd years ago, but really quickly fell in love with it. I suddenly realized, this is where all the decision-making rights are. This is where the power, this is how you affect change. This is how you get stuff done. And then I worked in the sector for 20 odd years, from finance officer, a bit like you, Ansel, up, was fortunate to have some FD roles with national membership organisations like the Association of Charitable Foundations. I'm currently a consultant and in finance, mainly with small charities up to $1 million, and I'm treasurer of the Association of Chairs. And I'm a certified bookkeeper, and I've got a master's in charity finance and accounting. But honestly, what I learned on the job over 20 years, because you can't do it for that long and not make a few mistakes. So my first question to the panel, and Nicola, I'm going to come to you first, really, really briefly. What type of treasurer are you? I've worked with so many different organisations with so many different types of treasurer. I've been really fortunate. They've all been, without exception, amazing, supportive, knowledgeable, generous. They've all been really different. What type of treasurer are you, Nicola? And you're on mute.
Sorry. Building on what I said earlier, I've got quite a big toolkit these days, so I've got skills I can pull out of the bag if I need them. I'm still enthusiastic about the causes. That's what gets me still. So that means I don't mind being down in the weeds, but equally, if someone wants to talk to me about investment strategy or reserves or something a bit more techie, I'm happy to do that. And I think sometimes people think that because I've got a list of initials these days, that I won't want to be bothered with small charities. It's not true. I'm a real grassroots person. I worked in small businesses with PwC for years, did loads of startups, done M&A, done all sorts of things. And I think that informs my practice. But the main thing is to try and be a relaxed treasurer. That's what I'd like to be, because you're not going in there to tell people off. You're going in there to help them with stuff. And once you've given them the talk to say, it's the responsibility of all trustees to know about money, you've got to help them to do that and not make it scary. And so that's really what I try and do. However uptight I might be feeling about something, I will try and exude a warm feeling based on all the attributes you were talking about that you need to be a good treasurer, but also just thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen? Let's just do it systematically. We'll look at what we need, we'll do a gap analysis, and then we'll find the right people and we'll fill the gaps. So that's the sort of treasurer I would like to be. People who work with me might tell you something different, but that's what I think I'd like to have.
I think you're fortunate. I don't think anyone is here today to contradict you. So what we're taking away from that is that you are a calm, methodical, deeply knowledgeable, technically expert, but also quite strategic treasurer that's happy to roll their sleeves up and get stuck in. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
But also be innovative. But you've got to be innovative. You've got to listen to what the other trustees are saying and actually react to that without necessarily having your finance hat on, because you are first and foremost a trustee.
Reading the room, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a real skill. Ansel, what kind of treasurer are you?
So I think I've changed over the years. So I started as a treasurer. I didn't have any management experience. I had technical finance experience. I've been working in finance offices, and I wanted to expand in, and push myself. But I was very much all I knew how to do was the numbers. So I would sit in the corner of the room in the board meetings and almost feel like I needed to let everyone else do the decision making. I could just feed them the numbers, which is essentially what I was doing as a management accountant. I was sitting in the corner of the room, not telling any, and I did that in my first role. And if we get into it later, we can talk about how roles change you and all that sort of thing. And what I thought was interesting, I stopped that role and I had to take a step back from volunteering for a couple of years, various different reasons. When I came back to volunteering, I thought, I'm going to take on that sort of role again. But I found that I wanted more. And also, it's what I do all day, every day in my day job. So I often don't necessarily have the headspace to go really deep into the numbers at the minute. So I found I'm much more, I want to sit at that point with, you know, and with tiny charity, you know, where I'm working at BI, by Pride, like I am just doing the numbers because the numbers aren't that complicated. But what I feel like I'm much more interested in is sitting with the senior management and the people who are used, you know, because we're employing people who are who are accountants themselves or have that experience. I feel like I'm much more taking on a mentoring role for those accountants, for them to say, to have someone to bounce ideas off and all that sort of thing. So that's where I'm finding myself sort of sitting at the moment, and I'm sure it will change if I do a different role. But yeah, that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
That's such a lovely reflection. That ebb and flow, that change in focus and a way of being. I recognise that in myself as a treasurer as well. Thanks, Ansel. And Kemi, in your former treasurer role, and you're now an ambassador for CharterPath, which encourages accountants to share their finance superpowers on boards. What kind of treasurer are you?
I would say similar to some of Nicola's sentiments, definitely very hands-on. I found that when I went for the treasurer role, it's always a difficult dynamic because you have the documents that say what you should do, what you should ask for, how it should be. And I remember going in thinking, okay, I need to see the management accounts, I need to see this. And I wasn't seeing that on the first day. And I was thinking, okay, what's happening? But again, a big part of it is reading a room, because particularly for the smaller charities, the person responsible for the finance is responsible for the admin, is responsible for service users, could be on the phone whilst trying to prepare the accounts, and could be sort of completely multitasking. So by knowing that you have to read the room, I felt I had to be more hands-on. There was no point in me sitting there saying, okay, where's this, where's that, so I can do the work that I needed to do. So I would definitely say I'm very hands-on. And similar again to some of the previous comments, I try to use my finance skills and how I operate in my daily role to the same in the voluntary sector. So by that I mean, in terms of the roles I've undertaken to date professionally, so to speak, it's been less about sort of being that siloed finance person and not necessarily engaging. For me, I really like to understand what the organisation is doing and understand their understanding of finance, because there's no point me just sending reports if nobody's going to look at them. There's no point me giving them technical terms if they're not going to understand it. For me, the sort of one of the greatest joys is if somebody says, oh, I don't like numbers, I'm not a finance person, and I can make them understand how the numbers work and what they need to look out for. And then they're almost like challenging me, saying, Kemi, okay, have you missed this, or what does this mean, what do I do about that? So that's who I strive to be, and I think that's my kind of what brings me the sort of most enjoyment in my role.
Yeah, I love that, Kemi, so much. I think, you know, it takes a whole organisation to be sustainable, doesn't it? Whole village to raise a child, whole organisation to be sustainable. The numbers bit is really important, but it is the job of all trustees. As treasurers, we've got a job, and there's a job description, a brilliant one on the Honorary Treasurers Forum website, but it is the job of all of us. So that holistic approach I really like. Thank you, Kemi. We're going to open it up. Are there any questions? You've come with questions, we hope. And you can either put your question in chat and I'm going to read through and pick it up, or you can raise your Zoom hand. You will come to the top of the screen and I'll take the questions one by one. And I'm going to get, and I'm just so you know, there's someone that facilitates an awful lot in their day job. I'm really comfortable with uncomfortable silences, but Russell, you've saved us. Thank you. What's your question?
Hi. Yeah, I've got no financial qualifications, and our charity is looking for a new treasurer. The old guy's been there many years and he's looking to step down next year. So there's plenty of time for a transition. But I've got no financial background. Do you need any financial background to be a treasurer? And secondly, how long does it take if you're a treasurer of a charity? I know it's how long is a piece of string, but give me a rough guide. How long does it take if I was to accept being a treasurer of a charity? We've got a management accountant part-time, so they do all the number crunching.
Great, two really good questions that are asked a lot, Russell. Thank you. I've got one clarification question. Jen, a guide to the size of your charity. What's the annual income roughly? Doesn't need to be exact. Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's a few 100,000. I
Yeah.
don't know, we're a couple or 300,000 or 400,000, something like that. We're a volunteering organisation. We've got something like 300 volunteers or something like that, 40 staff, something like that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Because finance is quite context dependent. If you're a tiny kitchen table charity, it's going to be different to if you're a national tens of millions charity. That's really helpful. Thank you, Russell. Two questions. Do you need a qualification? And how much time does it typically take? Nicola, what's your thinking?
My thinking is, what's your day job first? As in, you're busy saying, I haven't got any financial qualifications. I bet you use finance in your daily life. So you're probably doing yourself down from that perspective to start with.
Yeah, so
you answer that, and then I'll based on what you say.
I'm retired, so CEO, MD of 3 or 4 companies, been on about 20 boards, pretty commercial background. So I definitely read the financial statements regularly.
Right, okay.
I've had FDs and
That's
CEOs
fine.
reporting to me.
You've answered your own question almost then. You're qualified massively by experience, so don't say you're not qualified, point one. Second thing is, charity accounts are an arcane art, and however qualified you are, when you first come to charity accounts, you have no idea what's going on, because reserve accounting is weird. So even if you think you're financially qualified, there's some smiling around I can see smiling around them. You see your first set of charity accounts, you think, what? Hey, excuse me. And that's when the next part of the question is, you need 2 things. One is to get some technical information yourself, which if you're used to it, you can get from the Charity Commission, you can get from anybody. And I'm going to plug the Treasurers Forum at various points tonight, because that's partly why I'm here. But the Treasurers Forum is an umbrella body for aspiring and current charity trustees, those who take responsible for finance. We've got a WhatsApp group with 148 people on it, and they're on every day. So if you think, oh my God, what's this? Ping it on the WhatsApp group and somebody will answer you. And anyone who's in the group will know there's a flurry usually of questions, and you look at it, you think, I'm not interested in bank interest, I'm not interested in reserves, I'm not interested in whatever policies. You don't look at it, and it's a flurry, and it gets answered in an hour, and it's absolutely instant. So I think it's a good support thing. So a mixture of, don't diss yourself because you've got qualifications which don't seem to fit, because nobody actually has when they first start. Secondly, get some support either from your peers or technically from there's all sorts of places you can get it. And if you do it, then again, the Honorary Treasurers Forum website will help you out with where to look for stuff, because it depends on the age and state of your charity, what they might need, and also the state of what you're inheriting. Because if someone's been a treasurer for a very long time, it gives you an opportunity to have a look at what they've done. And as a trustee, you'll be itching to change the stuff. So it'll give you a bit of perspective, and it will give you the right to sell a new vision to the rest of the board about what finance can do to support you. So I think that's enough from me. Give the other guys a chance, but I wouldn't be put off. You sound like you're ready.
Thanks, Nicola. Ansel, would you add anything to that? And in answer to Russell's second question, how long broadly would it take? Right, you're a chair of a charity. At some point you want to recruit another treasurer, presumably. How long is it going to take Russell if he's chair of a charity, of an organisation that's not small, few 100,000 income, 40 staff, 30 odd volunteers? And I know it's an impossible question.
300 volunteers.
300 volunteers. Thanks for the correction, Russell. Yeah. And sort of thoughts.
So I was just going to say, yeah, I've not really got anything to add to what Nicola said in terms of capacity and capability. I mean, absolutely. I could tell you stories of people who've come into charities who think that they know how to do accounting because they've got all the qualifications, and they're much worse than the people who think that they don't know how to do it because, you know,
like Nicola says, charity accounting is weird. You have to learn how to do it. There's all sorts of things, you know, there's all sorts of differences. But if you've got the curiosity and the background knowledge of knowing how to do, you know, how to read accounts and all that sort of thing, you're already halfway there. I do have a quick question. In terms of how long, are you asking how long it would take you to bed into the role or to get someone else into the role?
No, I'm asking once I know it'll be tough at first, but once I'm settled in, is this a day a month, a day a week?
Okay, how much?
What's it going to take me to do this role?
How much time? You should be able to do it with, because you've got a management accountant there doing the actual day-to-day stuff, you've got employees, you should be looking at maybe a day or two a month across, and it depends how deep you want to go into the numbers and how much you want to work with or challenge your management accountant, which, you know, if you're in a decent place, if your charity's running stably and it's your role as treasurer, and what you want to do is get on some, get yourself a sort of finance subcommittee, so a couple other people on the board who share that, and basically you're doing it at the same frequency. I try and have, when I've got a finance sub going, I try and have it at the same frequency as the board meeting and maybe 2 weeks before the board meeting, so that you can review those papers before they go to the full board, and at the full board you've got a sort of thing. So it's just a bit of extra, basically adds an extra day if you include the meeting itself plus the reviewing and all that sort of stuff at the frequency of the board meeting. And if someone else is doing the actual accounting, you shouldn't need to add much more than that. You might need to have a few bits and pieces with like a few meetings with that that management accountant, with the senior management team, you know, as things come up. You probably want to be involved in the audit, which again adds an extra, depending on how, actually you wouldn't be audit, you'd be independent examination. So, you know, that's probably about an extra couple of days a year. Again, just making sure that you're there for those meetings, making sure that you're there for that kind of thing. So that's what I would be looking at.
So summing up, Ansel, 2 days a month and an extra couple of days at pinch point times around year end.
Yeah, I think I'd say that's about, it's about what I spend.
Yeah, I think that's about what I spend. Nicola, you nodded. Well, Nicola, you probably spend a bit more. Kemi?
Well, I do, but I'm a glutton for punishment. But I think in Russell's case, for instance, you probably want to bring some of your commercial practices into the way the board runs. So if you've got a nice little management information pack you like, as in it's not this column versus that column, you want to do something graphic, then you're effectively deciding how long your piece of string is. And I think if you're trying to share knowledge between, acting as a buffer between the board and the management accountant, which I'm sure not in Amsel's case, but sometimes that can be a quite a difficult hurdle to get over, because the management accountant does not wish to be asked any questions, and they regard it as a failure if anyone asks them a question. So they just give you more and more information until they can't possibly be asked anything else. You'll be the other end of the spectrum from your, which levers do I pull to make this work? And therefore you'll, in the first year, probably be trying to see, well, what don't I like about this? And when do we do our strategy? When do we do the business plan? And there'll be cadences about the board meetings that bring in particular chunks of work that you have to do. And also you'll want to involve your fellow trustees in stuff too. So again, it's you defining how long your piece of string is. There's a base camp, which Amsel's described very well, but then after that, it'll be up to you. But it will stabilize. And even if it's a couple of years, at that point, you'll then be thinking, yeah, I've got this. And yeah. That's enough for me again on that topic.
It does take, I think it takes a full cycle, a full year to bed in, doesn't it? And if, for what it's worth, Russell, I always think 2 days a month is standard, one looking back, one looking forward, which is the critical bit. And then it gets more when someone leaves or the world changes, we go through COVID or something like that, and it gets less in August and January, maybe when everyone's on break, but good luck with that. And when you come back in a year, when we run this again, and you can say you all lied to me, it's taken me 5 days a month ever since. That would be helpful. Let us know. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up one question in chat, BL, because we kind of covered it. And then I'm coming to, there was a question I saw that was lovely. Barris Vardy, we're going to come to you in a minute. And Kemi, I'm going to ask you to respond to Barris's question in chat. Before I do that, BL, sorry, don't know your name. I want to pick up your point. Isn't there a requirement to have regulatory knowledge, how and when to complete and submit annual returns and other paperwork? And I think this is a really important point. We've got 3 jobs in finance. You've got to get the systems and processes right. That will tell you what the numbers are. You've got to get the reporting right, and that will tell you what they mean. You've got to get the decision making and the leadership right, because that'll tell you what to do. We're here to spend, but we have to do that in a really regulated way. Do you need to be a trained professional to do the compliance piece? Not necessarily. You can learn a lot, and there's an info sheet coming around after this, signposting to really good free sources of information and training. But you're right, there is a regulatory framework that we need to be familiar with, but I wouldn't personally let that be a barrier, especially if you've got a good independent examiner, auditor, finance director in the mix. If you're of a tiny charity, join the Honorary Treasurers Forum, get your support network. Yes, be all over the compliance, it's important, but don't let that be a barrier, because there's loads of support out there if you need it. Now, Kemi, coming to your question, and Russell, I'm assuming we've answered your question. Is that okay? Happy to move on? Yeah, brilliant, great, thanks. Kemi, Barris has a question. Barris, do you want to come on and ask your question? I can't see you.
Sure.
Hey, Barris,
Can you
you're
hear me?
there. Fantastic. Great. Tell us your question. What's your question?
So as a young aspiring professional in this field, what's sort of the best place to start and to ensure that your growth continues throughout?
Did you
I
hear
know
that,
it's quite
Kemi?
broad.
Broke up for me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No,
Yeah,
it's a good question. I would say with this, and I think it's applicable to anything you're doing, I think it's being clear on your purpose, why you want to do it. I think on the downside, some people volunteer because they feel they need to have it on their CV, or in this day and age, their LinkedIn profile. They want to be seen to be a better person. But if that's solely your why, you're not going to be able to contribute, because that's not going to give you the full motivation. It's not going to be fair for the charity, and it's not going to be helpful. So I would definitely say to spend time considering what your why is. Are there particular causes that you're passionate about, or is it the case that you want to be a treasurer and develop those skills, and you're not necessarily too concerned about what the cause is, you just want to contribute? I think that's definitely a good starting place. I'm sure there'll be name dropping throughout this, and there'll be resources sent afterwards in terms of places you can look for opportunities. What I would suggest is, when you look at those, get a feel to see what piques your interest, which will be different for different people. There, it may be that, again, certain organizations pique your interest. It may be that the requirements specific to being a trustee and treasurer is something that you're looking for. So again, you're trying to find out what it is that interests you. And again, once you've got an idea of that, you can be much more focused in terms of the type of opportunities that you apply for, and will be right for you as much as will be right for the charity. In terms of continuing to grow, again, I would recommend a lot of resources and name drops that we've mentioned throughout. I think now it's much easier to get accessibility to trusted resources. So spending less time on a search engine to say how to be a great professional, compared to using the Honorary Treasurers Forum, using social media where there's established networks and reliable and professional networks. You can definitely use those. depending on the organisation that you end up with, it could be somebody that you buddy with or you mentor with, so you can bounce off ideas from them and you can ask them questions. So I definitely recommend to sort of keep that sort of inquisitive mind and always think about, how can I learn? No question's a silly question. It's probably a question that everybody wants to ask but doesn't, or has never thought to ask because somebody's given a technical answer and said, oh yeah, that's the deferred income. Okay, what does that mean? And everyone looks at you blankly, which means that nobody actually knew what they were referring to, but it became to that deferred income or any other technical term. So definitely having an open mind and be willing to learn would be my two major recommendations.
Thanks so much, Kemi. Barris, have you got any follow-up questions from that?
I know you mentioned some name drops, but I haven't heard any names yet. I don't know if it's just me not knowing. So maybe it's to make a list on the chat of places that one like me should be looking at.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite British and reserved, so that's why I say it. Yeah, definitely later.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Barris. And there is an info sheet coming around after this that's signposting where you can look for free or paid for support. And I would also, if you haven't seen it already, Marie's comment in the chat about that, the onboarding experience and how a good board will have a really good induction that will help you understand what the charity is about, because they're all slightly different. So I'm going to come now to the next question in the chat, which is around picking up on that point earlier about the differences of being a charity or a non-charity. And the chat keeps moving, so bear with me. I'm having to you mentioned J Snowed. Hi. You mentioned reserve accounting as a difference between commercial and charity treasurer stroke accounting practice. Any other key differences in terms of financial governance or focus? And I suppose there, I mean, like the honest answer to that is yes, many. I suppose there, the key question, the key word in your question is, what are the key differences? And I'm going to come, Amsel, to you first. The key differences that leap into your mind when you're thinking about charities, and then Nicola, I'm going to come to you.
Well, as Liz knows, I work relatively closely with Liz. We do roughly the same job. I think about this a lot. And for me, there is the thing that makes, I often, when I do this sort of, I do training for boards, and I do train, you know, and for people who are coming in on and how to think about charity finance. And I often ask people to kind of come up with what they think a charity is, you know, because it's always good to hear the differences and what it means to people. It's very emotive. And then I get to hit them with my my legal kind of financial governance side of things. You know, this is what we're going to talk about for the next hour or so. And for me, that key difference is charity is legally structured in a way that is different from commercial activity, because in commercial activity, you're paying for a service, you're giving someone money and you're getting something in return. And the balance of power is all around that interaction, that exchange. And in accounting, we call that consideration. You know, it's got a very specific terminology. You know, if you give someone enough value for the thing that you've got from them, that's considered fine and dandy. And if you don't, that's considered, you know, that's what a lot of accounting is about, kind of trying to work out whether or not you did get the correct consideration. So that's the kind of technical side of that. Where charity differs is the person you're asking for the money from is not the person who you're giving the service or the consideration to. So whereas commercial accounting is about understanding a sort of an exchange that is very balanced, or it might not be balanced, but it's an exchange between two entities. Charity accounting, you're effectively looking at exchanges between three entities, with charity sitting in the middle. And when you look at, and Nicola, who is on the SORP committee, has I sometimes see the despair coming through. What on earth is going on in the SORP? Why does it exist? What are all these rules doing? They're often doing it badly, but what they're aiming to do at the very least is to ensure that there is a there is that kind of trust where someone gives you some money in order to do something, and you then go and do the thing with it, is there. So that's the sort of slightly more rarefied version of what the differences are. And then when you drill down into it, pretty much every time you have to do something, you're based on that. So you've got trust, you've got restricted accounting, and what that's doing is saying, I'm giving you this money, legally you're not allowed to use it for anything else other than the purpose that I'm giving it to you for. When we do, for example, charities have to show income at the point at which it's in their bank account, not at the point at which it's got any value, it's got value to them. You can't say, well, this is a prepayment because it's against services that I'm doing next year. Or you can't do the sort of R&D balance sheet stuff. It's all based around that, trying to show that true and fair view kind of throughout that point. Does that cover, is that good enough? I don't want to kind of keep going on. So I think
you could go on for days, couldn't you? And we've still not touched the side. What I loved about that was that you picked up on the fact that trust is at the heart of everything, which comes through to fund accounting, which is really complex often. You only need 2 or 3 grants and you get quite a level of complexity. And your point about precarity, it's not as simple as you make something, you sell it and the money comes in. It's a complex dance between beneficiaries, charity and donors, and that's why I love charity accounting, because the challenge of building a sustainable charity is not for the faint-hearted. Income recognition, fund accounting are the 2 things that leap out to me to be different. Nicola, you're on the SORP committee. What else does Jay Snow need to be aware of?
Not on the main SORP committee, which is a very rarefied body and set itself rules which are so arcane and complicated that you could almost pick the 12 people who are qualified to be on it even before they've done any interviews. I'm on one of the engagement strands, which is the small charity one, in fact. Sorry, the trustee one. I'm on the Treasurers Forum. I could have done a number of them. And what they are, it's a bit like a focus group that actually reflects on the topics which are likely to be included in the new SORP. I think AMSL did a really good job there talking about what's different, but can I just add a couple of bits? I'm not going to go all techie because I'm not trying to put off potential treasurers. That's not the point of this. The main thing is that charities don't have shareholders, and all the Companies Acts and all of the rules around the Financial Services Authority are actually designed for shareholders to get decision useful information. So what we're doing in charity accounts, 2 things. One is the Charity Commission marks its own homework in that it acts as almost a provisional wing of the Financial Reporting Council, and it sets up the accounting standards. So they have to apply to the corporate charities, but they also have to apply to all the other charities that might do accounts. So the Charity Commission have got a really difficult job in deciding what we ought to do by way of accounts. But if you keep in your head that there's no shareholders, so what we're trying to do is communicate with the users of the accounts to get what they want from it. And that's determined by, as AMSL said, what the law says, how you silo your income, and making sure that if a grant's made for a particular purpose, that you can follow through to see that that grant was spent on that. And that then takes you into the balance sheet, which is a different beast as well, in that you keep those silos, you keep the restricted and the unrestricted income separate in the bottom half of your balance sheet. And the top half is going to depend entirely on what sort of charity you've got. As in, you might have assets pretty similar, but you might have heritage assets, you might have been given stuff. There are things which are topics which are covered in a lot of detail in all the accounting requirements because they reflect the nature and the purpose of charity accounting. Decision usefulness, we remember that. The law gives you the silos, no shareholders gives you the detail that's required, and then decision usefulness gives you what is added by SORP. in the trustee annual report, because they bung it all in there. If it's not something that the FRC is interested in, then they bung it in the trustee annual report. So that's where you'll get a lot of the different stuff about charities, and you're supported to do that. So
Thank you.
does that make sense? Does that complement what Amsel said, or does it confuse it? I don't know.
I'm going to ask you, Jay Snow, does that, I mean, we could talk about that for a long, long time. We've given you a snapshot. I don't know how useful that is to you. Give us your response. What are you thinking?
Yeah, sorry, it's Jeremy. Yeah, very, very useful indeed. Thank you. We're in a startup charity. We haven't had any restricted funding to date. So I guess, I don't know if that's a good thing or not a good thing. I don't know. But so
it's great. That's what you want.
Yeah, so thanks, because that's a good tip. So I'll try and steer funders away from applying any restrictions to funding. But thank you. Yeah, very, very useful. Just my limited experience so far. We're a startup charity, so the thing I've been contributing quite a bit so far is just focus on cash flow, because that's really important in a startup, on the work we're doing and making sure we can launch, having sufficient reserves and security of funding going forward. So that's kind of a big focus for me at the moment.
And you're in the sweet spot. When you're at startup, you're in the sweet spot. You don't have legacy systems and legacy Gordian knots to unravel. You can get it all right from the beginning. And we all have everything crossed with you, that you only ever have unrestricted funding. And when you've worked out how to do that, write the book, you'll become very rich. If you are also fortunate enough to have restricted funding and you get into fund accounting and reserves, it's a really good discipline to get that charity accounting expertise where you can in the mix. An independent examiner, an auditor, an external person, have it in the mix somewhere, Jeremy, and you won't create a Gordian knot, because you're in that sweet spot where you can get it all right.
Yeah, thank you.
Beginning. But it's a lovely place being at startup, really exciting. Good luck with that. Good luck. And I'm gonna come out of the weeds now of charity accounting. We could spend all week in SORP, and frankly, why wouldn't we? But we don't have long, and I really love Penny's question in the chat. What are the red flags and what are the green flags? What makes your heart sing and what makes your heart sing? We've all done it, joined a board and not looked at the accounts and then thought, we generally only do it once. Red flags and green flags. Kemi, what do you look for in a charity before you join the board?
I would say, obviously, being a qualified accountant, I do look at the accounts and I do try to analyze them. Sometimes depending on the organization, I will go a bit further. So some things I've spotted in the past, you have an organization or charity, I should say, that states it's committed to EDI or DEI, and then when you look at what their representation is, it's absolutely tiny, and it just doesn't resonate, and there's no comments to say how they get into where they want to get to. So that's often a red flag. I'd say conversely, a green flag is when a charity is advertising for a treasurer role, they offer you the opportunity to sit in on a meeting. I think that's really good, or meet any of the other trustees informally if they are able to prepare a pack or say that they are. I think that's really good. Again, going back to my earlier point, in reality, they may not be the sort of most up-to-date accounts. They may be 2 months ago or 3 months ago, but the fact that they're aware that they need to present something to a potential treasurer or trustee is a very good starting point, because they know what the minimum standards should be. They know what will attract people to come in. So I think some of those are green flags, but it doesn't mean the absence of them is a red flag, because if it is a small charity and there's only 1 or 2 full-time employees, they're doing everything more so in this climate, so they're not going to be able to do everything that they want to with the best will in the world. They may actually just be trying to survive. So I definitely sort of say, in summary, any charity which is striving to provide the information or is aware of its how they're being perceived, so what they're putting in their reports or accounts, they're actually seeing it from an end user point of view. Does that resonate? Are we backing up our chat, so to speak? And if we're not, can we say why we're not, but still please come to join us?
Okay, so Kemi, you found the perfect charity. It's a cause that's really close to your heart. It feels warm, it feels welcoming, and they've got challenges, as most small charities certainly have, and larger ones. Let's be honest, it's a difficult climate at the moment. Demand is going up, cost of living crisis, all that stuff we know. And you look at their accounts and you think, and they've been incredibly open. We do have financial challenges, and you can see that it's rings on a tree. You can kind of see it coming through the financial statements. Is that, and different people have different responses to that. For me, that's often a green flag, rightly or wrongly. Is that a red flag or a green flag to you? And what do you do when you can see that there's financial risk in the organisation, which inevitably there normally is? What do you do to make yourself feel, I'm going to be able to contribute to this, and I'm going to help manage it?
Yeah, so I'd be with you, Liz. I think for me, it's a green flag, because if you're able to spot there's an issue, if you can spot it, quite often it means a lot of the other stakeholders can spot it as well. So the next stage of that is, like, no, to your point, what can I do about it? And again, I think it can sort of go sort of one of two ways. If the charity is candid and within a few meetings or correspondence, they say, okay, look, we think we're in trouble, we've applied for this funding, we don't think it's going to come through, we need advice in terms of where can we go from now. I think that's a good opportunity, because if you have the relevant skills, if you work in your professional working life, if you've done something similar, you can apply some of those principles to that charity to say, okay, have you thought of this? You can look at these ways to generate income. Have you thought of approaching these donors? I would say conversely, the sort of red flag would be if you are going to meetings and, for example, there's not regular attendance from the trustees, you're not getting a minimum quorum requirement, so you can't even necessarily make decisions. That tends to be a red flag, because if you don't know why those trustees aren't attending and you're unable to make decisions, the risk is that if you as an individual propose a solution, you might be the person to implement it. That's fine if you want to, but do you have the time? Again, we've said that, you might want to contribute 2 days a month. If that's all you've got, and the risk is it's now 5 days a month, have you got the time for that? Do you want to do that? Have you got the bandwidth? So that tends to be the sort of red flag for me. And similarly, if you're raising these issues and saying, okay, we need to do this, if we don't, that's not going to happen, and you're not getting the required response from the fellow trustees, that's definitely a red flag. And I think as an individual and with your professional integrity, you do have to make that difficult decision in terms of, this charity has got great potential, these are some of the risks, but I can't invest that time, and it's also too risky if I can't bring everyone around, because it's not your role to bring everyone around. You don't manage a charity, but I've done as much as I can. I don't feel I'm going to sort of be able to contribute, and sometimes it is difficult, but you do have to step away to sort of protect yourself, really.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Kemi. I think there's some great insights in that. And it is about, so much of it is about timing, isn't it? And being, once you find that magic place where what the charity needs is what you can offer.
Yeah, definitely.
And what you need is what the charity can offer. It's a relationship two-way, isn't it? That's a special thing, but it doesn't always happen. I think recognizing that is really important. Thanks, Kemi. So what are your green and red flags? And start with the red, and then we'll end with the green.
I think the red flags are, I'm getting better at seeing them, having been through a number of different kind of both good and bad trustee experiences. And you can't always know it during the kind of initial stages, but these are the things you tend to learn. Sometimes you will learn in the first couple of meetings. So give yourself that space. There's things you can look out for in the kind of, and if you can get, I think as Kemi was saying, if you can get onto a meeting when you're not actually co-opted yet, that's always good. But sometimes you've got to give yourself that space to look at how the organization functions and how the board functions, and you're only going to see that when you're in the middle of it. And the red flag there is just the kind of power dynamics that you want to be looking for. Is it a is it a case that it's an organization that is about doing, they're focused on doing what one person wants to do, or a particular continued way of doing things, or are they actually focused around doing their, achieving their objects, achieving the, working for beneficiaries, or for whatever it is that's the purpose of the charity? Because the purpose of the charity can seem great, but if it's not actually fulfilling that purpose, if it just exists in order to when you get into it, if it exists just to stoke egos or to keep something else going, that for me becomes the red flag. Because if everyone's really pushing for stuff to work, but they don't have the skills yet, or they don't have the understanding or whatever, but they're trying and they're willing to learn, like that, even sometimes it might take up more time than you've got and you have to pull away. But I think for me that's something I want to be part of. Whereas if it's just about or if someone if it's just about self-propagation or existing for the sake of existing, or propping up someone's ego, that's a losing game. You just find yourself pulled into that that dynamic, that power dynamic, and you don't give anything and you don't gain anything. So that's my red flags. Green flag is the biggest green flag, and this comes in, I've seen a little bit in the chat, people talking about when we talked about that thing of whether or not the trustee, the treasurer should be the only person of responsibility, and also talking a little bit with Barris, talking about how you grow. And to me, those can be intertwined. It's like there is a green flag there where if you are being nurtured and you are being supported. So there are some organizations where you probably don't want to go into them until you've already got some experience, but there are other organizations which have got support structures which will say, look, you may not know how to do this yet, but we're going to help you learn because we want what you've got, which is your experience. They're not saying we need a fully qualified accountant who's going to come in and do the work. They're saying, actually, what we want, we've got the management accountant on board, or we've got the finance team, whatever. What we want is your experience, your knowledge, your life. We're going to actually just your entire life. We're going to take it and we're going to use it for our charitable purposes. But if they're doing that and they want to encourage that, that's the green flag. Like, because you may not feel like you've got anything to give. I remember I didn't really feel like
I'm going to stop you there, Ansel, but because we're going to wrap up now, wind down. I could listen to you all day, and what I take from that is that on the first point about red flags, I'm biased, but for me, the chair is really important. I think it's a great chair that turns a group of really willing, dedicated, brilliant trustees into an effective board. And so I always want to see that there's a chair, if there's a really strong chair, then I'm in. And I don't mind a bit of financial difficulty and challenge. I quite like the challenge, but I hear what you say around culture and around that nurturing and finding the right organization at the right time. I think that's really important. We're going to close now, and I'm going to come to the panelists. And I said before we came on, you'll have 30 seconds for the closing one, but you don't. You've got about 17 seconds. Your former self is asking you, the charity said, will you be my treasurer? And your former self is saying, no, I can't possibly do it. It's not right for me. It is right for you. What do you tell them? Nicola, in 17 seconds.
17 seconds, I'm going to give you the story I always give to anyone who listens. Charities are like Tinder. There's 170,000 of them. Just because you swipe right doesn't mean you've got to spend your whole life with them. So that's my takeaway.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Penny said to me, if there was any jargon throughout, my role as chair was to explain that. And the honest truth is I can't explain Tinder, but I believe it is a dating app. Other apps probably are available. Thank you, Nicola. I've learned something.
Thank you, Judge Pepper.
You're welcome. Kemi, what are you saying to your former self?
I'm saying, think of all the excellent things you've done before. Think of the times that you struggled and thought you couldn't do it, and you've done it. You can do this. Just go for it.
Yeah, you've got this. Wonderful. Thank you, Kemi. Ansel, what are you saying to your former self?
So my former self went into trusteeship thinking that they wanted management experience, ended up at an LGBT charity going, yeah, I'm just an ally. Yeah, look at me now. Like the charities, volunteering changes your life in ways that you will not expect. And being part of charity culture is so fulfilling. So just go for it.
Perfect ending. Can't top that. Thanks, Ansel. Ansel has a LinkedIn post on explaining some of that, and it's really right. Okay, friends, we're done. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you got your questions answered. We hope you come again. Please consider being a treasurer. There aren't enough of us, and not all heroes wear capes. Some become charity treasurers. We hope to see you again. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming. Great to have you. Good luck, Russell. Good luck, Jeremy.